Thank you. On to item 7.5.
Move the second reading.
I need to recuse myself from this item, so I'm going to leave
I'd
this.
second that.
Did you want to say something, Michael?
Yes, I would just note for the record that as an ordinance, we need 3 affirmative votes for it to be adopted.
Is that true for any ordinance?
Yes.
That's a majority.
I thought it was a majority of those present and voting.
No.
Is there any public comment on this item? No?
Call the question.
I have some comments first and some questions. And I want to thank Councilmember Atkin, who's actually not here this evening, but pointed out that I voted against this ordinance at the last council meeting, and she felt that I didn't kind of thoroughly explain what my reasoning was behind that. And so I just want to take a couple of moments to ask some questions and also say some things. First of all, I understand that one of the justifications that we're talking about here is that when we did the land swap, it was zoned in a particular way. For me, when I look at the timing of that, that was an interim map. And yes, it was zoned in a particular way, but interims also suggest to me that at that point, maybe the zoning was not settled. But more than that, when I look at the zoning map, we're creating an island of mixed-use residential surrounded by a very thin ribbon of parks and open space. And I asked the question whether the property owner could still have the parking lot, even if it was zoned park and open space. That park and open space does permit parking lots, and you address that,
Yes.
right? And I'm unsure. To me, when I look at the findings that would have to be made on this, I think that having a building there in an area where we have parks and green space on both sides would actually make that space less usable, less pleasant, less valuable. And those are the reasons that I voted against the ordinance. Now, another question that I was thinking of as I was looking at this is when we originally talked about the land swap, at that point, could we have said that we wanted it zoned differently? Or I'm trying to figure out if there was a point in the negotiations where we could have looked at this and, because in this timeline, there are several different places where we may have had an opportunity to do things differently, and I'm wondering if that could have been part of the land swap, hypothetically.
You could have requested anything you want to be of the land swap, but the land swap is not something that you can, absent use of some other authority, which we aren't going there on that, requires the other party involved to agree to those terms.
Right.
And it's really sort of basic that if the city wants to create the park that's been discussed and shown, then we need the cooperation of the doctors who own it so that we can create this land swap. And their position is, as a condition of that land swap, we want our property that we are going to be owning, or that they are going to be owning in the after condition, to have its zoning to be the same essentially land use designation that currently exists and existed at the time in your general plan. And your general plan is sort of the, it is your constitution for your land use. So notwithstanding what Charlie is saying, that, yeah, you could allow for parking in a park open space designation, this zoning that's being proposed here is also consistent, it's much more consistent, I should say, with its existing general plan designation that the council approved. And that's what the designation was at the time that they agreed to go along with this concept of swapping the property. They didn't have an obligation to do that. They did have a condition to work with us to provide for that, and that's what they've done. And if we don't get this vote tonight,
I hear you, Mike.
then we don't have a deal. And so we can either continue this to a future meeting when we have Councilmember Atkin here I would presume that she would vote the same way she did on the first reading. And, if that's the pleasure of the council, then we can continue it to, I guess, your meeting September 2nd. As I alluded to in our prior meeting, that will delay the closing of the transaction and the eventual construction of the park. So,
Let me point out one other thing.
Uh-huh.
As a result of the action that the council took at your last meeting on the general plan designation of the doctor's parcel is now MUR, mixed use with residential, and the surrounding city property is park open space. The zoning is required by state law to be consistent with the general plan. So if you don't approve this ordinance to make the zoning consistent with the general plan, then you'll have to go back and amend the general plan to make it consistent with what the zoning is, I guess, because they're not supposed to be inconsistent with each other.
Right. I understand. This is one of the things that we want to address. For me, I am not convinced that this is that I can make the findings that we're talking about, that this is not going to interrupt that space, but I'm willing to continue this until Ruth gets back.
Move to continue the item until the first meeting in September.
Second.
No one opposed. Okay.